welcome to another episode of Analytical Innovations podcast. Today, I'm really excited. I've got Mel Koller with me. He is the president and CEO of Alabama Farm Credit, a top agricultural lending cooperative, and he's got over 20 years of experience in agricultural finance. Mel offers a wealth of expertise and visionary perspective on the industry. And from other conversations we've had, not just your industry, but I think you've got a lot of great insight into a lot of things, not just the financial and agricultural industries. His leadership in supporting farmers and rural communities really positions him to share valuable insights on how emerging technologies like AI transform agriculture and finance, and how it could transform either other enterprises as well. So welcome, Mel, and thanks for joining us here for this episode of Analytical Innovations podcast. And today, what we'll be discussing is AI fact or fiction. And Mel's unique position has him in a role where he is thinking through how to apply AI in the right way to his industry. And you're here to talk about some of the myths or fictions that you've seen in the wild. So thanks for coming on and welcome. It's good to have you here.
Well, William, it's good to be here. Do I call you Dr. William? Is it just Doctor?
I only make my kids call me Dr. William.
Well, thank you for having me here. I'm really excited to be a part of this. And since, you're instrumental in analytical AI, I was hoping you were going to solve a few of my problems today. So.
Well, maybe we'll get there. We'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see. The AI therapy sessions are a different
Exactly.
game altogether. Well, cool. I think it's neat to talk to people from different industries about AI and how they see AI working in their roles. When I personally started doing AI stuff, it was so focused on some specialized technical aspects that there wasn't that broad application that we see today. And now we see AI and AI applications everywhere we look.
Sure. Yep. Absolutely.
So from your perspective, like, where do you see it kind of coming into your industry, just in broad terms?
Well, I would say the biggest one that most people would think of, frankly, is from the consumer standpoint.
Okay.
So most of our employees and our customers, their first interaction with AI, even if you think about the initial iterations of it through Alexa and those AI helpers in our phones, they were all based on a consumer business model. That's what has set the expectation for both our employees and our customers in terms of what AI should be when we deploy it. Yeah. And that's created some very interesting dynamics in the business space that I would say we are all working to still overcome.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, the funny thing about using those consumer grade AI assistant applications as your bar is that realistically those are ensembles of all sorts of different models and processes, and they're not a singular AI process. And so if you're trying to build something like that from scratch or within your IT organization, there's a lot of orchestration of a whole bunch of different things going on. It's not like you can just flip a switch and turn something on.
Yes, exactly. And that's where the reality hits the road, is exactly somewhat to what you're talking about, where AI, as it's moving forward, especially in the business world, it's becoming specific, smaller, modular models built to angle at a specific part of the business. So, for instance, the top three places where business in general is implementing AI at some level of scale is marketing, HR, and some level of customer service.
Sure.
At our firm, we're still working on all three of those fronts.
Yep.
But the expectations that we're battling against is really from that consumer sentiment where they first interacted with the technology. And so we've thought about through this paradigm of the easy button. And what's funny is we kind of have started to experience this in our industry even before the consumer AI, as we've see ChatGPT and things ramp up, I should say, people's expectations. It actually started before that.
Sure.
So 10 years ago, started on an enterprise level mainframe project for financial services. And customers immediately thought new technology, everything should be better. It should be 10 generations better than the prior version.
Yep.
And you quickly had to start this conversation of the experience you have in Excel or Word or the Microsoft Suite, just as a pure example. That is one system built for roughly 7 billion users at a budget of 10, 20, $100 billion, maybe more.
Mm-hmm.
Our project has got a price tag of $25 million. We're going to serve 2,500 users. There's a totally different economies of scale for that.
Yeah.
Versus that consumer level mass marketed product. And that is still one of the biggest challenges we see in business implementing new technology is that differentiation between what they expect and what's reasonable given the budget and skill set and everything else.
Yep. Yep. No, and so would you say that's kind of one of the biggest myths that you run into is that kind of easy button myth of hey, AI's out there. I go on, I saw this silly meme from Reddit where somebody said, I've asked ChatGPT to teach me how to talk to the crows, and guys, it's working. You know, we have this feeling like I can just ask any question and then suddenly it'll grant my weirdest dreams. Is that kind of the myth, that easy button of I push it and then boom, problem solved?
I would almost take it one step further and say this. The average employee's expectation is not just that it will anticipate and deliver to them a ready-made process that they're just there to monitor. But they want the process to stop in inconsistent ways where they want to make the decision they want to make in that process. And it's not consistent from one customer transaction to the next. And that level of expectation, obviously, is hard or nearly impossible to meet because everything is really a design of systems and processes. Yet uniquely, and my sample size of gathering this feedback is thousands of employees over the years. It's remained consistent for the last 12 years, and it's amazing what they think reality should be versus what's achievable. Now, of course, we as leaders have to step in and draw some boundaries and create some guidance and really start working with the employee base to understand what's possible. But I think it's one of the most untalked about elements in business is this myth that AI, once fully implemented, is an easy button. And as employees or folks in the process, we can kind of come in with our brains checked out. And sporadically, where we feel like it, we can just press the button and check back in and then check back out again.
Let me check in just for the parts of the process that I enjoy. And I don't want the AI to take over. And then all the other times I'm going to be napping in the back.
It's a little unfair, right? Employees work hard, and I'm not trying to shortchange that. But
absolutely.
That is kind of, when you hear all the digestion of like user experience and user input, when you distill it down, there's a lot of these common themes that stick out over the years. And it's like, wow. And with AI, we're just into the next iteration.
Well, and it goes back to the quote, and I can't remember who said it, but any technology sufficiently advanced is indistinguishable from magic, right?
Correct.
And so I don't know, would you say that notion of an easy button is even something that customers of the technology could even verbalize that they're doing, that they really think that it's an easy button? Or do you think that that really the technology is just advanced enough and they don't understand it, so they also don't understand what it can't do?
I think that's a fair statement, right? In most business settings, IT is a separate silo.
Yeah.
So the other 80% of the workforce inside the organization that is executing transactions or deals, they don't know coding, they don't know structures, they really don't know documented electronic process or process born out of a system. So without that understanding, you're right. A lot of it just kind of feels like an easy button. So why can't the easy button kind of go that next 2 or 3 or 5 steps forward and ease my pain in these other areas? That's a very fair point. And I think that's where we as leaders have a big burden of and responsibility to explaining, hey, this is where the boundaries are. This is as far as we can take it. The real realities here, budget constraints, timelines.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. So when people find out that it's not the easy button, either through experience or through proper communication, what is that letdown like in your experience? Do people just tend to decide not to trust it anymore, or do they figure out what it's actually useful for? How do you think about that?
That is another great question. From my observation and experience, some level of mistrust continues in perpetuity. You can make major advancements in future iterations of the platform. As we've experienced internally, we're on probably what would amount to the 4th gen of our platform with various enhancements. There's still some level of mistrust. There's still those folks that, in their mind's eye, well, this or that didn't work the way I expected or the way I believed it should 4 years ago. So it's still my job to try and break it and find all the holes. And things like, well, how often does that process occur? Is our dollars really creating the best impact by chasing that hole? Those things don't necessarily feed in their mind. They expect somebody else to figure those problems out. But that level of mistrust does, to a degree, always remain. But obviously, as leaders, we're trying to bring them forward and along and fill as many holes as we can, reasonably speaking.
Yeah.
But yes, that is an interesting dynamic or another interesting observation of that continued level of, do I really believe everything this is doing?
Yeah.
It miscalculated on me once 2.5 years ago. I think it'll do it again. So I'm going to watch everything to see that.
Which I would imagine there's a certain level, especially with all of these Gen AI tools now, there's a certain level of value in a little bit of skepticism
100%.
with the answers that you're getting out of them.
100%. That's exactly right. We can dive into some of the other myths, but some of the other things that we're seeing in terms of that skepticism being a real value add for understanding better how to implement AI is terribly important. Because otherwise it has some really serious ramifications over the long haul.
Yeah, no, I absolutely. So we've got several other myths other than just the easy button that we had kind of talked about and populated beforehand. We can go through some of those as well.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it kind of informs that easy button conversation. I know for us, one of the biggest difficulties we have when implementing new AI models is setting the stage for those expectations of what it's going to be able to do, what it won't be able to do. A lot of times people assume, well, if a human was doing this, I would only expect them to get it right, 50% of the time. But because a computer's doing it, I expect it right 100% of the time. And then when it's not, or we can all sit around a conference room table and look at the analytics and go, well, clearly it got all of this wrong, then they don't even want to move forward with it. But I think if you can overcome that, then a little bit of skepticism, I do think is healthy when you're moving forward with these.
I think good skepticism and good self-evaluation of where the product really is in its life cycle in terms of being proficient at the necessary core tasks are invaluable tools, and having those people that can stay in that point of critical thought and not just, well, it's good. I haven't experienced anything bad with it, so there's no reason to question how it's processing. That's sometimes a bad place to be. As a whole team, you need that 5% that's going to be pretty critical and crucial about things, because like in our business, we're talking about moving money.
Yeah.
If that goes wrong, money goes to a wrong account,
Yeah.
something isn't set up right in somebody's deal, that has massive ramifications from a reputation standpoint. Uh, it's hard to build trust, but it's even harder to build trust back after something goes wrong.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
it's critically important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, now, one of the myths that we were kind of batting around going into this episode was this thought of um, there's always new tools coming out, new people coming to us proposing things. Does it necessitate having more and more pilots of this new technology, or does that actually lead to more innovation and more benefit, or can sometimes that be counterproductive?
So one of the best pieces of advice I got last year from somebody like yourself, an AI innovator that's in the space working on some of the harder problems that we see from a business or technical application standpoint, was this: it's not about AI holistically going into your whole enterprise. You
Mm-hmm.
need to pick 2 or 3 well reasoned test projects and focus on bringing those to some level of confirmation or denial about implementing a technology like
Mm.
that in that space or in that process. If you think about AI as a business conversion and it's going to touch every corner of operations, so we just need to go buy or create all those different models, you'll be here till the end of time trying to define even getting the first one implemented,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
You know that from your own experience. So one of the first myths is more is better is definitely not the answer that I've seen work well. I can give you an example off the top of my head.
Yeah.
We've been working on a project internally to implement AI inside of a process, and we've realized, thank God, by doing this at a small scale, small budget, well, we still have some data cleanup issues to resolve and data access issues to resolve to
Yeah.
actually bring it to fruition. So we will go back to the drawing board and work on that for the next 6 months so that then we can move the process redesign forward. But it's issues like that that you have to stop and think about. And if you're not doing technology in conjunction with the business, it's a real struggle.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. It's definitely something that we counsel people heading into any new endeavor where you're trying to add AI to it, or really any computer process, because the whole process of getting a computer to help you solve a problem is to specify that problem so there's as little wiggle room as possible. Now, I think these modern language models help make ambiguous language more specific as just the nature of how they work, but that's not infinite. Um, if somebody in my family says, "Hey, can you hand me that thing over there?" and they point at it, I have enough context to go and grab it. But if we just tell AI, "Hey, can you move this account to that account over there?" and that's literally the words that we use, it's not going to be able to pick that up. So there's still some level of error checking and specificity that you have
Mm-hmm.
to build in to those processes. So yeah, that absolutely makes sense. Um, so I think the next myth that we have on here is really one of, can you outsource AI leadership? And I think this is a good one to talk about because I know that there are tons of people that wield the AI hammer and they want to go around and solve everybody's problems. But we've certainly come into contact with end users who say, "Hey, I've had all these AI companies come to solve my problems, and they're using their big AI hammer, and now I just have a whole bunch of holes in my wall. But none of the stuff I needed hung up is actually hung up." So, what's been your experience with AI leadership? Can you outsource it? Can you bring somebody from outside in to help you with that?
Well, first and foremost, I guess I should give the firms that send me about 25 emails a day, congrats. They are diligent and eager in making sure I know that they're out there selling AI services. But in all practicality, AI, just like any other IT project, if you hand over that leadership baton to that firm, the incentives are all of a sudden misaligned for delivering that project in a large ways.
Sure.
If you want to keep alignment across your organization for end adoption, for good scope match, for solving the specific problems of the firm, the only way you can do that is by keeping it in-house and keeping the firm, the third-party firm, confined to a very specific set of job orders. Otherwise, they're running all over the firm, all over your established firm. It could be stepping all over the business, stepping all over IT, stepping all over leadership, and you're unwinding that spaghetti bowl of noodles to try to reestablish a functional project. That would be my first and foremost. But the other thing is, long-term, a tool like AI is going to be driven by the user base and the problems they see it can solve. And if we don't build a community of creative, thoughtful, interested, insightful team members that are going to want to dive in, get their hands dirty, and really think through, okay, I've seen this consumer version. Maybe I've even seen a test pilot internal small model version. Now let's think through, what would something like this in my space, in my department, how could we legitimately use it and let that inform what engagement we have with a third party? To me, that's the only recipe for success. Otherwise, it's like you're giving the people the keys to the car and they don't even have a driver's license.
Yeah.
You know.
No, and yeah, I hear that. If you don't have that internal motivation and that internal push to make it work, and this is, coming from the AI guy perspective, anytime I'm delivering a solution, I need somebody else that's on the inside that wants to see that solution succeed. So even if I'm or our company or anybody is helping push the AI efforts, there's only so far that we can get without that internal buy-in.
That's right.
And so that really makes a lot of sense. So this makes me think about the adoption curve of technologies.
100%.
Where have you noticed? Well, I guess, do you have a pool of internal users or customers that are early adopters that you should include on early pilots versus people that are just going to be irritated? Or are all of your users in one category or another of the curve? Or do you have everybody kind of along the whole thing?
We experience the same bell-shaped curve everybody else does in terms of adoption. And we definitely have identified that early 5% that we can get in the very early adopters and try to get ourselves to that 20% range in that next bucket. The hard part is what comes after that, because those kind of two middle buckets, and I'm sorry, I don't remember the bell curve.
I can't remember. I
the
know that
top of my
there's
head.
the early adopters, and then there's the laggards at the end, and then there's the middle people that have varying degrees of, happy to try it out after somebody's made sure it's not going to blow anything up, and people that are reticent to do it but will try it if they know somebody that's earlier in the curve.
Yep. So getting that meaty, basically 80%, it's a harder challenge. But yes, we most definitely see the exact same behavior both in employees and customers. It is not age-driven. It's curiosity-driven, I would say, more than anything else. And the funnest thing, honestly, is when you get into those middle two sections, because then you're creating a real win. Because almost any product can hit that 12 to 19% where you get those first two early buckets. The hardest part is digging into that middle section.
That's cool. I hadn't really thought of it that way before, that the early adopters are exactly that. They're early adopters. So, I mean, I know that over the years, and I don't really classify myself as an early adopter in general because I'm too cheap to be an early adopter of a lot of technology.
Yeah.
But, when Google releases some new feature of something, a lot of times I'll hop on and try it. I was like, wow, this is so cool. We can type in on the same document at the same time, stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
I think it was Google Wave or something like that way back in the day.
Yeah.
And And then just, less than 6 months later, that product just disappeared.
Of course it did.
Yeah. And I'm sure it got integrated. There's rarely any in tech, there's rarely any ever really like lost work. If it was a good feature, it's going to find its way into some other code base. So yeah, it's definitely interesting to think about how there is that certain segment of the population that regardless of what it is, if it's shiny and new, they'll try it out.
Yeah, I think that psychology aspect stays consistent. So if you're in that bucket of early adopters, you're going to do that for a phone. You're going to do that for a piece of software. You're going to do that for a piece of new food product that hits the market. It's just how you're wired. You don't want to miss out. The FOMO is real in that bucket.
Yes. Yeah. The FOMO is very real for sure. All right. So another myth that we have on here, because you've mentioned treating AI as if it is any other IT project. Is using AI like every other IT project, or is there something that really separates it from fundamentally just being another IT project?
AI in its current state is not just like any other IT project from the standpoint of it's not directly embedded in the enterprise level software that traditionally we use in established firms like ours.
Okay.
So I'm in a few arguments with thought leaders about this in our space. They think it's less than 2 years out. I think it's a minimum of 4.
Sure.
And the way that most institutions and firms like ours amortize out the cost of technology, we won't be in a position to afford that next generation with embedded AI probably for about 5 years.
Okay.
So I think there's a legitimate horizon here. But from a pure technology shape and form standpoint, yeah, it's a little different because it's not embedded in things yet.
Yeah.
But from an actual running the project standpoint, you can't treat it any different. The business has to be driving those decisions. IT has to be working side by side with them, understanding their vision and building a combined, this is your vision, this is what's possible. Now let's go down this joint road together and work 50-50 really to bring this to fruition. And that's really what it has to look like to be successful. AI is just going to be a little interesting because I think it's going to have various durations. I pointed out marketing, HR, and customer service have been some of the early adoption spaces, and that's because generally they are disconnected from most of the other mainframe.
Okay.
So you could buy an off-the-shelf customer service bot, let's say, and deploy it through your website, and it doesn't disrupt anything else.
Sure, because it's essentially working in the communications space, which isn't going to be attached to all the databases where all the PII is and all that kind of stuff.
Correct.
PII, personally identifiable information, for anybody listening.
Yeah, or we call it SPI as well. Okay. Same difference.
Oh, okay. All right. What's SPI?
Secure personal information,
okay.
I think.
All right. Yeah. I think PII is in the medical and security world, which is where we play a lot. So yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. No, so that's, yeah, it's just fascinating how all of these things interplay. And I often liken this new Gen AI space. It's almost like the printing press or something like that came out. It is a massively disruptive technology, and then a new way of delivering information that hasn't been accessible to us before. But it's interesting to think through it in the standpoint of actually trying to implement it. And if you were a bookseller at the time of the printing press, you're still going to sell books, but you'd have to integrate that into your process any way that you would integrate any other technical innovation to your process, whether it be due to the binding of the books or what have you. So that's an interesting way to think about it.
Yeah, and if you think about, because they've created all these containerized models now, and there's at least 5 major languages behind all of the various model or modular models you can buy, and there's probably more than that. There's probably more than I understand. You really could end up with a bunch of orphans inside of your organizations.
Sure.
And if they aren't designed to work with a specific purpose, and it's like, well, we've bought 5 of these, we'll use them someday. It's
Mm-hmm.
kind of like buying 5 extra staplers. They're probably going to sit up on that shelf and collect dust. So
Yes.
it's a really interesting paradigm we find ourselves in because it is a landmark technology, but it can find itself dilapidated
Are
just as fast as anything else.
Yeah, I mean, are we just collecting them like Pokemon just to have on our shelf and we can pull out our cards to show the other tech guys, or are we going to use them for something?
Yeah, I got a cloud version 1.6. It's still sitting up there.
Yeah. Maybe it'll evolve into a Charizard someday. I
Yeah,
don't
exactly.
know. Oh, so cool. Um, all right, so moving forward, another thing I think a lot of people hear about AI is how data hungry it is, and reasonably enough. I mean, anytime somebody asks us, well, how much data do you need? We always say yes and more, because that's always the answer. A lot of these models that you might purchase to get off the shelf, or you might download the open source weights, we're talking billions of parameters that they have. So there's never going to be enough data to fully train them the way that you want to, but is data enough? And I think you alluded to something a little bit earlier, so I'm interested to hear your thoughts on that.
So, legacy financial services institutions, data it literally is their Achilles heel. So, I'm talking about the biggest banks in the country,
Mm-hmm.
and this isn't derogatory towards anyone. This is just reality. They all are mergers on top of mergers. And when they needed to merge the data between the old legacy systems, they created a third party system to just collect out of the other ones and merge it into a singular database for reporting what regulatory item they needed to report.
Mm.
That means you've got a mismatch of databases running numerous versions
Mm.
for different business lines out there. So if you think about that spaghetti soup of data, and I'm sorry to use that analogy again, but spaghetti bowl of data is what I meant to say. They've got a lot of work to do before they've got a clean database
Oh yeah.
that you can reliably inform an AI model with. And
Yep.
even our business, where we refreshed our database about 6 years ago, it's still not fully complete. We still have some work to do to really flush it out and determine a strategy to create a data environment that's going to be supportive of these new technologies. There's things like data lakes coming on and some other tools around like Databricks and so forth to try to make it digestible
Yeah.
for AI or other purposes. But all of that has just happened really in the last, 8 months?
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about brand new stuff that we're trying to clean it up so even our existing records we can use to inform a process, even if it's just pulling a record out so we can run a workflow process that needs to happen for that client.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's so really, just to restate, it's not enough to just have data. You really need clean data and data that's going to make sense. In computer speak, we say garbage in, garbage out, and so it doesn't sound like there's a lot of garbage, but it sounds like there's a lot of storage units.
Well, there's a lot of storage units. They're all a little dirty. They aren't consistent.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the biggest problems we have in financial services when it comes to data is we haven't captured enough and we don't have an efficient way to capture more.
Mm.
And this leads me to a theory I have. And sorry, this isn't
Oh,
on what we
no,
discussed
that's
ahead of
all
time,
right.
William, but I really think at some point to efficiently get enough data specific about a client into a system, particularly in our business, we're in commercial lending, so it's more of a
Yeah.
relationship business. Our employees are going to have to use microphones to populate data fields as the program runs them through those data fields, because otherwise there is no way we can capture enough data through structured systems or even electronic applications or things of that nature to really populate the full database of what we know about a client.
Okay.
And so when you start thinking about what is the most efficient way for the average employee that's not an IT personnel to start populating a database, it's by voice. It's not by typing.
Oh yeah, because I mean, you think about just people's typing skills. And then I would imagine the voice to text models are getting good enough that it would be fairly reliable, and at least you'll get appropriately spelled words most of the time.
Yep.
At least I would think.
Yep.
Yeah, that's interesting. And yeah, that certainly makes sense. And I would imagine over time you could develop a agentic conversational thing that would populate the database based on asked questions.
Fair point.
But if you just had something that popped up, what's this field? It's this. What's this field? It's this. And did that by voice, especially for folks who may or may not have keyboarding skills. Yeah, that would be pretty fast.
Because we have to get to less friction on the customer side, so we can't ask the customer to just populate endless things. We're going to have to take that burden on through what interaction we have with them, and that's going to be the tough part is getting that interaction and transposing it into data.
Yeah.
And that's going to be the interesting problem I think we have to solve in the next decade.
That makes a ton of sense, and I know that the technology, or at least lightweight versions of that technology, isn't quite there. I mean, I know Apple released their little mail AI thing where it summarizes the mail,
right.
and every single one is wrong. I mean, I look at it, and every single one I'm like, okay, I know those words are in that email chain, but that has nothing to do with it. So that's where I think the IT lift, really knowing what technology you're applying, comes into play.
Yeah, exactly. So it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, cool. All right. Well, I know we've been talking for a while, and I promised that it'd be closer to 15 minutes. I think we're probably closer to 30 or 40 at this point. But it's been a fascinating conversation, and I've really appreciated your time and your insights. It's really fun to hear how people are applying this technology that I interact with a ton, but in different ways that I wouldn't think of doing it, and whether or not they're seeing the same challenges or different challenges. So moving forward, do you have any closing thoughts as to what you think the biggest AI challenges are for you or anything else?
I think the biggest challenge that we all have is AI is this robust, awesome tool. Like you said, it's like the printing press at this point, because it can take a layman's work that we put together, a thoughtful framework that we've designed all of the theory behind it, but then it can turn it into a finished product in a matter of minutes through a few iterations of refinement. It's phenomenal. The downside is when it starts interjecting its own hallucinations or assumptions or shortcuts, that could get replicated at an ever-increasing rate inside of your organization, whether it's how a decisioning model works or even just how a message is replicated in the organization. And I think that's going to be one of our greatest challenges, is dealing with those risks that are built into those models. They're not perfect, and they're not human beings.
Yeah. No, that's an interesting way of putting it, is that notion of when the AI is letting you design new things at scale because of the way that it's built, then it also allows you to replicate autonomously those bad assumptions that you may have built in, or it may have cooked into it because you weren't specific enough, at scale as well, and really build out that technical debt into the system if you're not on top of it.
Right.
So cool. Well, hey, thank you so much for joining me today for the podcast. And anybody listening, please like and subscribe on whatever platform you're on. And what's the best way for people to keep up with you if they want to follow along with things that you're thinking through in the industry and in the space?
Well, they can find me on LinkedIn. I do regular postings on thought leadership, things happening in ag and business. And then I have my own website, melkoller.com, so you can see some more in-depth pieces there. But, please comment, share, like, subscribe. William and his team are doing awesome work here. Everybody can benefit from the dialogue. And thank you for having me. It's a tremendous opportunity.
All right. Thank you very much.